Hey there, so this is going to be a quick video on one of the biggest mistakes that people make when using delay and reverb effects, either for the synthesizer or for the guitar. It's a mistake that I used to make myself, and I'm going to tell you what it is and how to avoid it. Now, it's actually a two-part mistake. Part one is something that many of you have probably realized yourselves already, but it leads to part two, which is something that's a bit more subtle and that you may not have realized. Okay, so let's start with part one of the mistake, and let's just focus on reverb for a second. So I don't know about you, but when I first discovered reverb, it went something like this. So I was playing something without reverb, like, I don't know, or with guitar. And then I turned on some sort of basic reverb, like the Hall reverb on this Sonicware Smpltrek, and I just used whatever default settings it had, and it sounded something like this. And I thought to myself, holy crap, that sounds so much better than what I was playing before. And then I noticed, okay, I see that I can crank that sound up a little bit, so I increased the reverb, in this case the mix parameter value, and then I took a listen to that. So I heard that and I was like, wow, that sounds even better. So what happens if I crank it up even a little bit more? That sounded even better. And then, well, you can see where this is going. I ended up cranking the reverb all the way up to its maximum value, which would sound like this. And at this point, maybe I should have realized, okay, that's a bit too much of a good thing. But did I realize that? No. I thought, wow, that sounds even better. I want even more of that. And then I discovered that, okay, in addition to hall reverbs, there are reverbs that emulate even bigger spaces than a concert hall, like arena, or a tunnel, or a reverb called infinity. And then I went through the same process with that. I started with the default values, and then I started bumping them up higher and higher and higher until I maxed out the infinite reverb, which would sound like this. And at this point, I probably really should have realized, okay, that's going too far. But did I realize that? No. I was like a drug addict, and I wanted even more reverb. So then I discovered that on an effects pedal, like the Zoom MultiStomp MS-70CDR, there is a reverb called the particle reverb. And if we turn this guy on and crank up its values, now we're going to sound like this. And it just goes on and on and on. And there are reverbs out there that'll go on even longer. They're like truly infinite reverbs. And here's the thing. Does something like this sound cool in and of itself? Absolutely. It sounds really cool. But as you might have been able to already tell when I was combining the synthesizer with the guitar, once we start doing any sort of layering with the music that we're playing, with different instruments and different melodic lines and maybe different chords or different rhythmic things going on, everything starts to become a bit too blended together, a bit too muddy, a bit too mushy, a bit too, well, reverberous or reverb-y. And not only does that happen with layers, where we're creating music sort of vertically, but it also applies to whatever we're doing horizontally. So for example, if we're doing a chord progression with a reverb like this, the chords start to bleed into each other, and especially if we're playing chords that don't really go together, that can start to sound pretty awful. Like, for example, let's try doing some seventh chords here. And again, it sounds kind of cool by itself, but it's like, can I actually build anything on top of that? Can I add other things to that sort of swirl of sound? And I think the answer is usually no. And so especially, I mean, if you're doing some like super, super washed out ambient music, this can be okay. But if you're trying to do anything that's more traditionally melodic and not just sort of like a complicated drone sort of song, it just becomes too much. Okay, so that's part one of the mistake. But then this brings me to part two, which is what is the most logical natural conclusion to draw from realizing that you're using too much reverb or too much delay. And I'll come back to delay in a minute. Well, logically, it would seem like if the problem is using too much reverb, then the solution must be to pull back and be more conservative or more moderate with your use of reverb. And so, for example, going back to the Smpltrek here, instead of using the infinity reverb, I might go back to a room-sized reverb, which is going to sound like this. And okay, so that kind of solves the problem. I mean, we don't have too much reverb now, but also we just don't have that much reverb, and it just sounds kind of, well, boring, right? So this brings me to the key insight that I had, and that, I mean, I'm not the first person to discover this, and I've heard other people talk about this too. In fact, I probably learned about it from some other YouTube video. But the key is, yes, moderation is great, but as the old saying goes, everything in moderation, including moderation. So what do I mean by that? Okay, here's the thing. So to go back to our reverb selection here, I can use a big reverb. I can use as big of a reverb as I want. For example, let's go back to that infinite reverb. This is a perfectly fine reverb to use. The key though is, in order to make it usable in a musical context, we need to dial back not the entire reverb, but the mix on the reverb. So right now I have the mix cranked all the way to the maximum value. And the problem with that is that as I play a note, the reverb is the same volume as anything I play after it. And so it's going to get in the way of anything I play after it. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid not necessarily having this big, huge reverb, but we're trying to avoid having the sounds collide with each other and get in each other's way. We need to make space for them. And the way we make space on them is by backing off the mix or the balance, whatever it's called on your reverb. So for example, on this one, the values go from 0 to 127. I'm going to start by going all the way down to, let's say, 20. So significantly reduced. And now let's hear what this sounds like. Okay, notice how we still have a very long tail of sound after the initial attack. Like, it still keeps going, but it's at a much lower volume, which means now if I play new sounds, new notes, after those initial ones, the attack or the onset of the new notes is going to be much louder than the tails. And so they're going to retain their clarity, and the two sounds aren't going to collide with each other as much, which means that now I can actually play a chord progression without the chords getting in the way of each other. And I can also layer other instruments on top of that. Okay, so what am I saying here? What is the actual lesson? Is it just to back off on the mix? No, that's not quite what I'm saying. This isn't just about the mix. This is about the general principle of everything in moderation, including moderation. And that doesn't always mean back off the mix. In fact, sometimes it can mean the opposite. And to show you what I mean here, let's switch now from reverb to delay. Okay, so I'm going to change our reverb back to a hall reverb with a fairly low mix. Now I'm going to add a analog delay. And for the delay time, the Smpltrek has BPM sync, so we can specify note values. I'm going to put on, let's do a dotted quarter note. And now I'm going to turn the mix up all the way to the maximum value. However, I am then going to take the feedback value and turn that all the way back down to 0. So everything in moderation, including moderation. We're going very extreme on one parameter and extremely moderate on the other parameter, which I guess isn't actually moderation, but well, you get what I'm saying here. All right, so if we do that, every time I play a note, we get one single copy of that note, a dotted quarter note of time after the initial playing of the note. And that's because we have the feedback all the way down to 0. Feedback controlling how much of the sound from the effect gets fed back into the effect. If we put that value on the maximum, then all of the sound gets fed back in, and we end up with kind of an infinite loop sort of situation. And then on the opposite extreme, where we set the value at 0, we feed back none of the sound into the effect, and so we only hear the effect once. And so it's just a single sound being repeated once. However, because we've set the mix all the way up, the volume of that repeated sound is going to be the same as the initial sound, which means we're going to end up getting kind of a duplicate of the first sound. Now this is an analog delay, and so the repeated sound is going to be a little bit degraded compared to the first one as a purposeful effect. But the end result here is that if we play, let me turn on our metronome here, so quarter notes without the delay effect on would sound like this. And now if we turn the delay on, it's going to sound like this. Or with guitar. Start to sound a little bit like the edge. And we can actually increase that effect by doing dotted eighth notes. Now again, the crucial thing with this effect is that everything in moderation except for moderation principle. So for example, the mix being at the maximum value is important because if we back that off, let's go to like the midway point and do this again. The repeated notes are now much quieter than the new notes, and so we don't get the same kind of rhythmic feeling or energy that we had the first time. So having the mix all the way up is important, but so is having the feedback all the way down. We start turning up that feedback. Let's go up to the midway point, for example, or even a little bit past there. Now if I try this effect, at the beginning it sounds okay, but then the longer it goes on, and the more notes we have entering this sort of carousel of the feedback effect, the more the notes start crowding each other, and once again we lose that rhythmic effect. And so to prevent that from happening, we need to turn down the feedback, even turning it off completely, in order to give all the notes enough space to do their thing. So a quick thing before you go, I recently quit my job in order to focus more on music and other creative things, which feels really, really good in a lot of ways, but it does mean that I don't currently have an income. Don't worry, I'm not about to ask you for any money. I don't have a Patreon. I don't have a course to sell you. I don't have a sample pack. I don't have affiliate links. I don't have anything like that. However, I do have a new project and a new channel. It's called Weird Frog. This is my mascot, this frog right here. It's sort of a one-man band, live looping street performance sort of thing. I'm starting to perform music on the street in order to make some money. And soon I'm going to have a sign when I'm playing on the street. And the sign is going to have a little QR code on it. And the QR code is going to be for people who want to tip me but don't have any coins or cash on them, or to follow me on social media. And anyways, it would be super, super, super helpful if when they scan that QR code and check out my social media account for Weird Frog Music, I have more than like 20 followers. It's going to make me look a lot more legitimate. So anyways, point being, if you liked this video or if you like my channel and the stuff I've been doing on here for the past year, it would be super, super helpful to me if you would follow the Instagram or YouTube channels. And you can find both of them at Weird Frog Music. I'll put links to the accounts somewhere. And actually, I guess this does relate to this video because in my music that you'll see on those channels, I do use a lot of reverb and delay effects. So if you want to hear more stuff like that, or if you just want to support me, check out those channels, subscribe, like, comment, do all that stuff. All right, that's all I got. Bye for now.